Hey, we are live, and I want to welcome everyone to MindPlore with Carla and Friends. And as I welcome you, I want to tell you that this is a magnificent morning, an awesome afternoon, and a wonderful evening to wherever you are in the world or when you are watching this show, because I know people are watching it and it's growing now, and I'm very happy to see that. It's growing by each show. Having said that, I am Carla, and my friends today are Huma Tariq from Pakistan, Kimi, Avary from someplace in California near Sacramento. I'm not sure exactly. She could tell us. Pastor Billy, who actually comes from Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania, where I grew up, but I'm no longer there. And Shivali S from India. So we have a very international show. And we're talking about communication and developing our listening muscle. The main problem in the world is that people do not listen to each other. And because they do not listen, they have trouble communicating. And when we're not communicating, that's when wars begin. So, having said that, I have a little job to do to get this out. And I'd like Kimi, who is a relationship expert and also an expert in communication, to introduce herself and maybe give her thoughts on this particular topic. Kimi.
Awesome. Thank you, Carla. It's so great to be here with you all today. I look at communication in a couple of different ways. We're either communicating with ourselves, we're communicating with other people, and we need to learn how to do both effectively. We also have this thing that we all suffer from. It's called stuck in your own head syndrome, or CEOs for short. That's stuck in your own head. We all suffer from that. And we make the assumption, typically, not all the time, but we make the assumption that the people we are speaking to are exactly like us. So when we're speaking, we may speak more quickly, we may speak more slowly, however our brain works, and assume that it will land for the other person. The other person may or may not be able to hear you based on how you communicate. We have an international audience right now, and I speak what I call traveler English. A little more slowly, a little more clearly. I enunciate a little more precisely so that people can understand what I'm saying. That's because I'm taking my listener into account. If you're the listener, sometimes you need to ask the speaker to slow down, to enunciate a little bit, to be more cautious and careful. When we're traveling, it's a lot easier to do that. In relationships, it's a little harder. And that's because men and women are so different that we'd be better off if we actually spoke different languages, because then we wouldn't think we were communicating. We would slow down, we would pause, we would make sure our listener was with us. And as a listener, it's really nice when you can provide the space for somebody to communicate fully. But men typically will speak in bullet points. That's short, concise sentences. Women tend to speak in essays. lots of different directions, flowery, filled with all kinds of details. If a woman speaks like that to the masculine, she'll get the glaze. If he speaks in bullet points to her, she might feel controlled. She might feel like he doesn't care about her enough to use some softer, fluffier words that we would do, because we make the assumption that our listener is like us or that the speaker is like us. So we judge them for how they communicate. Now, in terms of listening, it is, I call it sacred listening, when we're giving the gift of truly listening to somebody without interrupting. When we do that, the people who are speaking can feel heard, they feel connected to. And how do you do that? You have to get out of your own head so that you can be curious instead of furious, curious instead of judgmental, curious and really be listening.
Okay, so when you're talking about listening, what are some techniques you would use to help a person learn to listen better? And we're going to go around, but this question entered my mind.
I think one thing that's really important in order to be a good listener is to create a blank slate where you can listen to learn about the other person. If you're speaking with somebody or listening to somebody with a different opinion of yours than yours, and you're thinking in your head all the things and ways you want to respond, that's not listening. That's preparing to speak. You're not actually hearing the person you're listening to, or you're supposed to be listening to. I think that in order to be a good listener, practicing speaking can be really helpful. I think one of the big impediments to being an effective listener is that you're thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking about what you're going to say. Maybe you've never had the words come out of your mouth before because you've been thinking about them and it hasn't passed that piece of neurological system in your brain. I think that if there's something that you want to be able to say and share, practicing speaking it is really important. I find that it calms your neurology down, calms your body down, so that you are not preparing, because most people would rather die than speak in public. It's a bigger fear. Or sorry, they would rather, die than speak in public. It is a huge fear. If you're speaking to another person and you haven't formulated your thoughts, then you're nervous, you're not listening. So anything you can do to know yourself so that so that you know what you want to share, so that you know your topic, so that you know what you want to share, creates a space for you to be able to listen, to learn about the other person. I think that's really important. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Toastmasters is so important, because we practice prepared speeches on subjects that are important to us.
And you are one of the leaders in the Toastmasters group, but we'll come back to that.
Come back to that.
Huma, what is your take on this? And introduce yourself first, please.
That's fine. Sorry. Hello, everyone. And thank you for Carla again for having me here today. And my name is Huma Tariq, and I'm from Pakistan. I work in Rehan Foundation, where we focus on digital literacy and making everybody able to learn at least 1 lakh rupees a month. So we are talking about communication today again, and one thing about that Kimi said, it just clicked me that we are stuck in our head. That becomes a roadblock in communication. And as we have been talking from last two sessions about communication, I believe that poor communication, poor listening is actually a result of a habit that we have been ignoring. For example, as she said, we are stuck in our head, and we are so preoccupied to listen to be so attentive to what others are saying. So we need to work on a certain habit that makes us a good listener, right? For example, we talk, we want to be interesting than to be interested in the topic, whoever we are listening to, or we want to impress, not express. So when we focus more on speaking, our listening part would be ignored. So that's, and I hope in this session we have a new person too. I hope we will get to we will collect few points where we can practice certain habits, just like we take time out for exercise, for food, for sleep. We need to just practice to develop that muscle of listening.
Okay, thank you. Pastor Billy.
Yeah. Wow. I'm just loving what everyone is saying so far. And let me use an illustration if I could. So here's my phone right here in the video. If I want to make a phone call, I have to turn it on. And if I want to go to sleep at night so I don't get any phone calls, I turn it off. And that is the classic definition of communication, is turn on or turn off. And when you look at the original derivation of the word communication, I love to look at the original meanings of words, and the original meaning of communication is basically turn on, turn off. And we get the word communication from to make common. So this goes to what Kimi and Huma were saying, is that when we listen, when we speak, we because there are speakers and there are listeners. We have to make it common to both. We have to make it common. And that's why, Kimi, I love what you said about sacred listening. More people, and as a pastor, I always say, I want to be a better listener than I am a speaker. So, I've been at conferences and people will say, oh, that individual, that woman, that man was a great speaker. Well, we're the ones that will say, I want to be a great listener. That have we ever talked about somebody being a great listener? And so, Kimi, where you talked about sacred listening, part of what I do as a counselor, as a listener to hurting people, I'm an international Christian humanitarian. I just got in from Ukraine. I sit with the trafficked women that were taken by terrorists in northern Iraq. And so I have to be a not just a good listener, but a great listener. And so therefore, this goes, Kimi, to what you said about being a sacred listener, is that I have to turn off, for me, I have to turn off the privilege of speaking and turn on the privilege of listening. And so I said this, I think last week when we were talking about communication, and I'll conclude with this, is that every conversation that I have, including, I think if we think about how many conversations have you had today, whether you're in Pakistan or India or the US, how many conversations have we had today? I've had about 12 so far. And since I woke up this morning at 7 a.m. with my bride of 42 years, with a couple of my kids, with, you know, this individual, that individual. And here's the, I think the great key to communication is that every conversation must be intentional. In other words, the person that we're conversing with and making common with, they have to be our sole focus, and we have to listen to them. And so I love the word intentionality when it comes to communication. And Carla, back to you. Intention.
Well, now that it's back to me, one thing that came up in my mind about communication, I want to point out that we have two second language speakers here when it comes to English. Huma is from Pakistan, and she actually, I don't think anyone's having trouble understanding her, but she herself feels she speaks broken English. I've been trying to figure out what that's about. I asked her and she said, well, I don't know all the words. And I said, neither do I. What's the big deal? Because of that, her understanding of what I say or what anyone says in English could be very different from how we use the words. Shivali is from India, speaking English. And again, I think her main language is Hindi, am I right? Shivali?
Yes. Hindi, we are Punjabi. So Hindi, yes. The national language.
And again, her use of words may be different from Shivali and me. And then we have Kimi and Pastor Billy. And even when they use a word, let's say Pastor Billy lived in a apartment for 90% of his life, and there's nothing about a single home. So when he thinks home, he's thinking about this little apartment. Kimi may live in this big house with many rooms, and when she hears home, she thinks of a home with grass around it. I think of home in different ways. I've lived in different types of houses. So when we see, even though we speak English as a first language, our understanding of different words can be different. I learned that when I was teaching reading. People, when they're reading, they think of their own experience. The same thing with speaking. We think of what we experience, and everyone's experiences are slightly different. And because of that, communication even gets a little more difficult. Now, because of the diversity here, the communication is going to be different between me and Kimi, me and Huma, Shivali, and Pastor Billy, because of what our experiences are. So listening doesn't mean just not in your head. It's also saying, I don't understand. And that doesn't mean you're being dumb. Actually, it means you're being more intelligent because you're taking the time to understand the words and what the person really is saying. Kimi, I saw your hand move. What's going on in your mind? And you muted yourself.
You triggered a thought in my head that I thought was, Pastor Billy said, be intentional with your communication. Every conversation must be intentional. I think that's true. I'm intending to listen. I'm intending to communicate. I'm intending to speak. And listening can be more than just your words. In fact, they say that words are only 7% of your communication. You're communicating through your voice tone, your hand gestures, your body language, your facial gestures. We communicate all the time. When we are speaking and listening, it's an agreement to be in conversation. Now, not every time we're speaking with somebody, we're going to have that official agreement. Somebody you meet on the street, you have a quick conversation with, maybe or maybe not, you will be on the same page. If you're in the same room with somebody like Pastor Bill or me working with my clients, where I'm having communication back and forth, where I'm listening, my focus is on them, or they're communicating with me. That's a container. So somewhere in between is where most of our communication lives. There's the counseling where you're single focused, you're there. There's the casual conversation, but conversations with coworkers or family members or your sweetheart, all of that has to be intentional. And when you are speaking, it can be really helpful to ask for the kind of listening you need. I really want your feedback, and I'd like to say all the things I've tried first, or all my thoughts about something before you say something. Because as a listener, if we're trying to clarify somebody's point or their idea or understand all the things they're saying, we interrupt them every 2 seconds, that person will lose their thought. They'll lose their train of thought of what they're trying to share. So sacred listening to me might mean you're just an empty space holding and being curious about the other person. It might mean, if you're in a more intense or important conversation, you take notes on a piece of paper as somebody is talking about what points you want to go back to. But there are times that we interrupt people. Women tend to do it more than men, although my husband is really bad at interrupting because he's afraid he's going to forget what he's going to say. So writing down what you want to say, a quick note that will remind you about what you want to circle back to, gives the speaker the opportunity to share completely. And when I coach the couples I work with on doing this, men will say, when they have a woman truly listen to them, they'll say, wow, I've never said that to anybody before. Or that's all I have to say about that. Most men never have the opportunity to get to the end of their thoughts, because the women they're speaking with will interrupt and interrupt and interrupt and interrupt. And often they'll just stop talking because they don't feel like the person is listening. That it can be a big, there's something like 50% of each. I think it's 51% of women on the planet versus men, something like that. We're always interacting with each other, this masculine and feminine communication. And it can really wreak havoc in our relationships. So I just wanted to say that, Carla, because the interruptions can feel intrusive or invalidating. So sometimes even saying, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a quick question about this because I can't follow where you're going without getting this piece of information. Or if you're the speaker saying, I need 5 minutes or I need half an hour. You cue, if you watch Pastor Billy's nodding, he's going, yeah, please let me know, please. Because if we can say that, then the person who is listening will be able to listen attentively instead of feeling like they've been interrupted or feeling like they're captive to a situation. And that doesn't go well either. Setting up the conversations to be very intentional. Back to you, Carla.
And that's a real issue.
Yeah.
Whoever you're talking to, if you are distracted when you're talking, and that happens a lot, let's be honest, you may be listening, but also thinking about something you want to get done, and you miss a very important point. And it gets done. And I just realized Shivali hasn't said a word. We have been talking amongst the three of us, but Shivali, you need to open up your mouth. And I didn't give you that opportunity. So let's get to you for a moment, please.
Thank you. Something very interesting which has come up today. This is Shivali from India. To everybody who's watching, well, Kimi has brought in 2 things which is making me think. One is that when she mentioned about that creating that space in our mind, like we are kind of caught in our own mind, we are caught in self-thought. So as a result, we often become, very impatient, and we want to express more. We want to speak more than, have sacred conversation or that listening thing. And so I would firstly want to know how to create that space, where I can, as an individual, be a better listener. And secondly, when she has mentioned about men and women, now that's very interesting because I don't know about the other countries, but in India, the men have a tendency of trying to dominate the women. I hope the men don't get annoyed with me, my own people who want to watch it. They don't like women to talk much or to express much. So a person like me, maybe some men wouldn't like me in India, that, oh, she expresses herself too much. So it's not the same in India. In India, a woman, if she's talking a lot, and especially if he's a Punjabi person from North India, he'll immediately tell his sweetheart or wife, spouse that, hey, you listen to me. So it's not the same here in India. Here, most of the women, they are unable to express themselves, even though they are very qualified and educated. So how do we manage that? So these are the things which are coming.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that because it happens in America too, but you've got 2 layers of things happening. One, there's a cultural masculine dominance, more so in India than in the United States. Women, the feminine of our species, tends to speak about 25,000 words a day on average, especially with each other. The masculine speaks on average about 5,000 words a day. And in the famous words of my father, that's all you need, right? And I say that because we have this, when we're cut off as women, it feels abusive, it feels controlling, it doesn't feel validating. And if you've got the cultural masculine dominating the feminine, you've got that layer, but you also have the fact that the masculine is single focused. They're not sometimes single focused, they're always single focused. And I would propose that many men will cut off or try to dominate a conversation because if a woman's going in many different directions, we have this diffuse awareness, and we'll talk about walking to the market and our work and our pet and our kid and our husband and going grocery shopping. We'll talk all about that within a 5-minute period. We have ways of just going in many directions, and the single focused human being has a hard time tracking that. And then they feel like they're going to fail you because they don't remember everything. So they shut you up because it's too much. So when I coach the women, it's give a single point. You don't need to have all this story. The world will not end without all the story. And for the men, I teach them how important it is to us to be able to unpack at the end of a day so that we can be really present with him. And it's like this huge gift to a woman to really listen to her. So what I would say in India, and this goes for anywhere really, but you could ask your husband or partner or coworker or friend, it doesn't matter, brother, sister, or brother, anybody of the male's persuasion, and say, there's something I want to share with you. When would be a good time? I need half an hour. Or there's something I want to share with you and I need 5 minutes, whatever it is. Ask for that time to talk and then wait. That means zip it up and wait until talk time comes. Because what happens is then we have their single focused attention on us because they've been able to find a time to do that. And when we get that listening, we feel really validated and they are providing something that we need. And then we can be happy and we express that. So there's a lot of a dance that goes along with it that is important. And it's not all that men want to keep us down. It's sometimes that they don't have time or the capacity to hear all the details of everything. And when we learn to communicate in that way, we have a way more nurturing relationships with the men in our lives because they can truly give us what we need instead of that glaze or feeling cut off or invalidated. Does that help, Shivali?
Yes, this is so beautifully said, nurturing the relationship. It requires a lot of patience, Kimi. It requires a lot. It's an investment. That's why we say you invest in the relationship. You're patient. You have to understand that there is a difference. I think it's God-given or whatever. So thank you so much. That's really wonderfully put. Yes.
I think a lot of it is hardwired into us. The feminine is the gatherer of the species, so an hunter-gatherer. So they go out into the meadow and they're looking for beautiful things and usable things and edible things. We're constantly talking to scare the critters away so we don't get eaten. And we're protecting the kids and we're multitasking. We love bags and baskets and things, don't you, ladies?
Yes.
Right? I mean, I get a nice bag from the grocery store. I'm like, ooh, look at my new bag. My husband could care less, right? They're the single focus. They're the hunter. If you think about it, going hunting and picking mushrooms at the same time, you're gonna not get the deer or the mushrooms probably. You have to be really single focused, and they're hardwired for that. So when you understand all this instinctual differences that get in the way, then we can rise up to our more spiritual, conscious selves. And that's where sacred listening lives. Through understanding some of the dynamics, we can have peace. In fact, my tagline on my email says there will be peace on earth when men and women realize what treasures we are to each other.
You know, it's amazing what you said, Kimi, about conversation. I have a good friend who's a man, and recently we've been really working hard on good conversation from either one of us. I need to cut down, he needs to talk more. And what I've noticed, and we do a lot of texting to each other, is that recently I'll get a thumbs up, or I'll get a nice sticker, or I get some type of communication, which I never used to get. And I began just not expecting anything and lowering my expectations. And when I began lowering my expectations, our conversations became more real. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm a little surprised, but at the same time, that's exactly what you're saying. He feels more comfortable writing, sending something. So he does. Even if it's that thumbs up, no one realizes how much that thumbs up took to come from a guy. Huma, you are smiling and kind of laughing at this. What's on your mind? I don't want you to feel out of the conversation.
Yeah, I actually reflecting it to a lot of incidents, and reflecting it to myself, and listening to Shivali. I want to ask everybody of you that sometimes we encounter people who are sometimes burdened, broken, hurt. There are some people out there, when I approach somebody and after listening to my story, they said, oh, that's nothing. We have been through even harder than that. So that is where we need to listen to beyond words. As Kimi said, our words contribute only 7% of the communication. So that's what we need to do. We need to listen to beyond words. Like the other day, one of my nieces, she came back from school and I asked her, how was your day? And she said, it was good, we played. But beyond her words, I could not feel the same feelings. Her words and her body language, her eyes and her energy said something else. So I started to have some open-ended questions. Okay, so what happened today? Okay, how's your friend? And then after a few questions, she opened up. I extracted the thing which was hurting her, and then she expressed herself. And she expressed how she had a fight with her friend or something that was stopping her from sharing it with me. Maybe because I am elder than her. As Shivali said, we are from different cultures, so we have a lot of barriers between communication with the elders and the younger ones. So I was smiling because when Shivali expressed that we are not allowed to speak much, because whenever we try to speak to our elders, they say, oh, that's nothing. In our times, we had been through even harder than that. You are being so ungrateful. Go back and have some gratitude or something. So anybody from you who had faced the same, or is just in my society?
No. I also have faced these situations, and we do. It happens. We do the same thing with others also. Oh yes, because again that mind talk has begun, as pointed out earlier. We start thinking we are focusing more on ourselves rather than listening to the other person, and vice versa. So yes, this is a common experience.
I think it's been conditioned. Like from ages, we have been conditioned this way.
Right. It's another piece of the cultural dynamic, right? In Pakistan or India or many of the Middle Eastern countries or whatever, there's more of a expectation that elders are respected than, for instance, the United States, which is kind of tragic, actually, because elders have wisdom. I think perhaps one of the reasons elders always want to share is that they want to uplift us. They want to take their knowledge and infuse it into the younger folks. They want to make sure you get something, and they want to feel validated on some level. They want to feel heard, because in some places we don't listen to our elders. There are homes in America where elders are dropped off and kind of not really seen of that much anymore. It's a really tragic experience, and there's a lot of wisdom there. So as younger folks, if we can provide space for our elders to share their wisdom, you're more likely to get them to hear you. And if you say, I want to share this story, something that happened to me today, and it would mean a lot to me if you could listen to the end and then share what you're thinking. That's setting your listener up to win. The more we can communicate up front and be intentional about it, about what our needs are in this moment. I need to vent because I'm really angry, or I need to share something that is confusing me, or I have a happy story I want to share. Whatever it is, then if you can say that before, your listener will be set up to win. Also, women tend to hear a story from somebody and match it with a story of our own. We do that because it's about connection. We do that with men, and it kind of drives them crazy. If if you're a female elder, you tend to do it with the younger folks. As younger folks, we do it with our friends. Like, it's not a good habit to be in, especially if you want to have an intentional conversation. Of course, there are those conversations that we have woman to woman in a group of friends, and we can go in millions of different directions in that conversation. And we leave that feeling, oh, so good, right? But that's not the kind of talking I'm talking about. Matching story for story can feel to the listener like you're not really listening.
And if you're not really listening, there is no communication. I speak to people around the world every day. Some can say sentences and get some thoughts out. Some are like, and I remember Huma, when she first started working with me, she'd come in and I would say, hello, Huma, and she would go. We joke about it now. You listen to her talking, you would never believe she ever did that. But that also goes with Pastor Billy. We talk a lot. We're ladies. Pastor Billy, I'm sure there's a few words that you can put in this conversation.
Yes, come on.
We want
to hear you, Billy.
We want it. No. You need.
Okay.
We want you to open it up.
Well, as all of our viewers have assiduously witnessed, I've been very quiet, and I feel like I'm swimming in an ocean of wisdom, listening to Carla and Huma and Shivali and Kimi. I'm just enjoying the swim. So I'm just in this ocean of wisdom, and all of what you've said is exactly true about men. And that's why John Gray wrote that great book many years ago, and it's still true today, because there are eternal truths. And the title of the book, I don't know if a lot of our outside US or outside English speaking will recognize it. But he said men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And so thus we are from different planets. We're in the same universe, but we're from different planets. And so, that's why I need to be, not only as a husband and a father and as a grandfather, 5 kids, they're all married, 9 grandchildren. I see them all the time when I'm in the US, saw them last night. And so there's so many moving parts. And as a husband of the same wife for 42 years, and I always say that my bride, I don't call her my wife, I call her my bride. And even that is very intentional, because when you think about wife, that like, it's my wife, but I call her my bride. I call her my bride. Every conversation, when they'll say, well, what's your wife's name? And then I'll say, well, my bride's name is Nancy. Now, why do I do that? Because I want to remember her on the day that we were married on May 10th. We're coming up on 42 years. So I want to remember her on that day of May 10th, 1980, when I promised that I would never leave her nor forsake her till death do us part. So when I'm looking for that picture because I have it here in my phone. So that's very intentional when I call her my bride instead of my wife. And so that's really what I do. And so, here she is when she was 17 years old, and here she is today. So I always say that I married the most perfect woman in the entire universe, and she's only made one mistake.
What is it?
Oh, what is it? Well, I'm sure the women on our time today can, people always say, oh, the only mistake she made is she married you, Pastor Billy. And I say, why do people always say that? But I actually set them up for that. But let me stop talking and listening to you. But Huma, I love what you said about extraction, because if we are intentional listeners, there are things that we need to, in a kind, loving, and I'll say, because of my worldview, in a Jesus Messiah-like way, we do need to ask certain questions and make certain statements that will extract the emotion, will extract feelings, will extract what we really need to hear from that individual, that we can offer words of comfort, we can offer words of consolation. I mean, I've just got to say, when I was in Ukraine, meeting with people whose entire families had been killed, sometimes I just sit and listen. Sometimes I am in a process of extraction. And let me conclude with saying, and that's my relationship. If I could get spiritual for a moment, that's my relationship with Jesus Messiah, is that, I want to speak to him, but I think the important part of my relationship with Jesus, with God, is to listen. Is just, I'm going to sit before him and I'm just going to say, wow, just reveal everything to me that you want me to hear. And then I'll throw a word into this whole communication dialogue, great dialogue we're having with all these wise women, is humility. When we're interested in listening to someone and not talking, it's really humility, because we always want to talk, right? Like I'm doing now. But that's why when I said earlier about communication is making things common, when we're in the listening phase of that communication and we're just saying, I'm not going to stand and speak, I'm just going to listen, that is a place of humility. So I want our viewers that are listening from around the world, humility has to be a part of communication. And we're just going to say, I'm going to shut up, I'm not going to talk, and I'm just going to listen. That's where humility must come in. And I'll shut up.
Well,
No,
I don't want you to shut up, but I do want to make a comment on something you said very early in this little soliloquy you did. You mentioned men are from Mars. Wait,
Men are from Mars. Yeah.
Yeah, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. But if you look at the planets, and there may be some reality, Earth is in between those two planets.
Bingo.
And, and that could also have an effect on our communication. You came from Mars, Pastor Billy. You speak a different language.
Yes.
We came from Venus and the goddess of love. That could be a totally different way of thinking of things. I never thought of it that way before, but I got so excited that I needed to say that. Kimi, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to what Huma was saying about extraction, and Pastor Billy mentioned also how we ask questions matters also. I think humility is a part of what we need when we're curious about somebody. I actually have a workshop called Voraciously Curious. Like, I want to be curious. I want to learn about you. The way we ask questions when we are curious and experiencing humility has a lot to do with whether or not somebody will answer at any time. Sometimes the masculine person has the experience of the day is done. I don't want to talk about it. That's a box. It's done. The feminine, we sort of go in many directions, like I said. So somebody asks us a question and we will give an answer. We don't think about it often. The men will think about it. They'll think about it like a deep well. They'll go into the well, gather up an answer, pull it out. But usually we interrupt them before they've gotten the answer. So we think they didn't understand the question. So then we ask a new question. And then he thinks, oh, that's what you want to know. So then he drops his bucket in the well to get his answer. And she's like, what are you, like, what's wrong with you? Why can't you answer the question? So then we give him a multiple choice. We said, is it this or this or this? And he goes, screw it. I don't think you actually want to know. And then they don't answer. So when we're asking a question of a man or a teenager, this goes for both genders as teenagers. What do you want me to know about your day or about school or about this project? And then you zip your mouth closed and you listen. And it may not come right away. And you put on a little Mona Lisa smile, gentle, soft, you just listen. And then answers will start coming. And then they'll say, that's all I have to say about that when they're done. But if you Reverend Billy or Pastor Billy and I have a different kind of context because people specifically come to us to talk about things. So we have a little bit more of a setup in our lives, especially with the people we work with. In day-to-day conversation, it's not always set up like that. So if you're extracting, give somebody the space to actually think about and answer your question. You will find gems, like, you know, the special jewels within that person that you never knew existed. So I just saw a big post from Shivali, or to Shivali.
Yes. What Pastor, what Reverend mentioned, that is the first thing which is coming to my mind, was that when he says that listening, opening up to God, and listening to that voice, the higher dimension that he's mentioning. I call it the higher dimension or the divinity, whatever we want to call. Listening to the voice of God. That is so important. And along with that, looking at the world scenario, again, the war zone that we are speaking about, and also vis-a-vis men, women that we are talking about, innocent. We are all aware of this. This book was published years ago, and I think most of us have read it also. But my question is that means the world needs more women leaders today? Because if men are in major countries the leaders, then why is there so much of war and destruction? I think we need more women leaders. If men think in a very precise way and in a very focused way, and women are more caught up with other things, I would say then women are more creative. And on the other hand, men do have a creative dimension to them also. Because you see, I'm into healings also. So each of us have a feminine side, has a feminine side and a masculine side.
Yes.
So if I look at the world today, I'm so sorry. It upsets me. And Pastor can easily tell us about this because he's so much involved in this. Then why are men behaving like this? I'm sorry, on this platform, I'm raising this. I think we need more women leaders so that there's less war. What would everyone like to say? So where's the communication thing? Are these men better listeners? Or
Are they what? I missed the last sentence.
The point was that women tend to speak more, and men are more focused. Those are the points we were covering, and yes, I agree with that. I'm looking at the world today, and it's not just about Ukraine. Every few months we hear of some war. Even today, it's not just Ukraine. There are pockets of war all over the world, and I find it's men who are the leaders. They are the ones who are taking the decision. Then where is it? Are they failing in their communication? Are they not listening to the voice of reason? Are they not listening to the voice of God? This is my question.
I think you're asking for Pastor Billy.
Yeah, well, that's one of the great questions of the world. And but by the way, I did find the picture, so there it is. I don't know if you can see it. I tried to put it in the chat, but there we are. That's how I remember my bride, May 10th, 1980. And you're right, Shivali. We need more women engaged. And as I shared with you in the chat, although others, our viewers couldn't see it, that men need to be better listeners. Men must be respecters of women. It has been a problem for, if you believe that the world is 6,000 years old, then it's been a problem for 6,000 years. And even today, and when I counsel folk in our church, in our congregation, the number one complaint I get from women is, quote, my husband doesn't listen to me, period, end of quote. And I turned to the man and I said, This needs to be priority number one for you. And so, and then in every sphere of life, whether it's, you know, politics or business, etc., I call them spheres of life, that we need to have more women engaged because they bring to the table something that men cannot. So here I am sitting here. I have 3 daughters that are all adults. They're all very successful as women, as people, I should say. And then I also have 5 granddaughters. So it's interesting, Shivali, now that we're talking about that, when I go overseas, most of the people I spend time with are women. And because they don't feel like the men in their culture, whether I'm in Pakistan or in Afghanistan or Syria or Jordan or Turkey or Nigeria or Sudan, those are many of the countries I go to, is that they're saying, you know, men are in charge and they're not listening. And I say, yeah, that's a problem. So let more women be in charge. So I'm working on that on a global perspective, as Carla said. Yeah, here we are, men in Mars, women in Venus, and Earth is right in the middle. So I'm working on bringing us all together for the glory of God. And I do it, and I'll conclude with this, I do it on a micro level, meaning my own family. And yet I also do it on a macro level. And I work in 18 countries, predominantly war zones. And I would say half of the individuals that I have as my volunteer team leaders are women, because they bring something to the table that men cannot. Because, you know, men, we like to fight, right? We like to fight. We always want to get our own opinions across. And so I say to my team leader in Khartoum, Sudan, Dr. Ida, I said, Ida, you need to be like helping me and engaging here in Northern Sudan, what we need to accomplish here on the issue for religious freedom and more freedom for women. So anyway, I'll conclude with that, because I don't want to talk too much. I just want to listen to all these great women that are on this session today.
Thank you, Mr. Billy. We are in a situation that we are coming to the end. We've gone over the show time. However, I do want to bring up that we do not only men and women communicate differently, women and women communicate differently, men and men communicate differently, because communication actually starts within our head. And I have to laugh. At one point, I was in a conversation with Rehan and someone else, and it was a man. And the person kept interrupting me, and Rehan, usually I take care of it, but I was kind of quiet that day. And Rehan said, how can you talk to someone if you're constantly thinking of what you want to say and you are not listening? And that's the whole point. We need to learn to listen to each other. We need to learn to say, I don't know, I don't understand. It doesn't make you look stupid when you say that. In fact, it makes you look more intelligent. I want to go around and just have everyone give their takeaways from this conversation. And then we need to end. And I'm giving a minute to everyone because we are way over time right now. And we'll start with Shivali.
Well, my takeaway is that we need to have more compassion. compassion and patience also. It's not just about men versus women, because from the Vedic perspective, we are all feminine. Souls are supposed to be, and there is only one God, the male principle. So when we are connecting with each other and we are speaking about better relationship, which is the need of the hour, in the global community also, patience as well as compassion, then only we can make this world a better place.
Good.
That's
Thank you. We're going to do ladies first, Pastor Billy. Huma, Huma, Yuma.
So I mean, that's the beauty of diversity. Like we have been discussing about things that how to listen to a man with women, and why with this culture, with that culture. That's the beauty of diversity. And I've been listening, and a lot of more. I want to speak more, but we don't have much time. I think if we want to assess ourselves, if we are a good listener or not. So we need to think, we need to see if we have created a bonding with the person I'm talking to. If whoever is speaking to us cannot come, uh, don't come back to us and listen and share their feeling again, it means we haven't created the bonding. And the listening is so important that we are even ready to pay money to just to be heard, just to be understood. So that's through this we can realize how important it is. And we need to ask if we are being the same listener or not, if we are listening beyond the words, listening to the body language and empathy with empathy. And I think, Carla, you should have another session with how to communicate with a different cultural, having this different cultural background, because I think MindPlore is the best platform for that.
And I was just thinking about that myself because I want to keep it on communication. Communication is one of our greatest problems in the world, and we need to open up our minds to more communication. Kimi? Thank you, Huma.
Yeah, thank you.
I keep giving you a different name every time I call your name. So
Problem. I listened to it.
I was thinking about something that Shivali had said, and it's really sort of resonates throughout this whole conversation. If we have different masculine and feminine people, I think there's masculine and feminine within each person, and then the dynamic in terms of any couple will polarize to itself. So if you've got somebody more masculine or somebody more feminine, will polarize to that. And learning that and recognizing that each and every person has something to offer. A lot of men are in leadership roles. We are having more and more women in leadership roles, which is a wonderful thing. And when I work with corporations or engineering departments or things like that, a big part of what I work with them on is for that masculine single focus to recognize the gift that this diffuse awareness, where we connect dots, we connect ideas together in a very complex way. And we can often see things that the single focused human being cannot do at that moment. So being curious about what we're missing is a really important question for men to ask. How can I broaden my perspective to make sure that other voices are included, that other perspectives that maybe see something beyond what my eyes can see? I think that's important when we're listening to anybody, but very specifically, it's with the masculine, single focused, and the feminine dynamic. When we can dance, they're two, it's like a yin yang sign. They're two gift rather than a curse. And I think one reason they don't listen to the feminine has to do with them being afraid that we're going to attack rather than offer ideas.
Thank you. Okay, Pastor Billy. It's your
Okay,
turn.
yeah, the last will be first and the first will be last, right? So let me give a wrap up. I heard several words in what Huma and Shivali and Kimi said: patience, compassion, empathy, value, a gift, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And I'll conclude by saying I want to bring in the word peace, because when we have good communication and effective communication and intentional communication, what do we bring in to the equation? It's peace, right? When we can bring together Mars and Venus and Earth and have all that come together, and it's intentional, then we bring peace. And there's a great teaching from Jesus Messiah. He says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." So let's make a commitment to be peacemakers. That's it. Back to you, leader Carla.
You know, I never thought of myself as a leader before. Thank you.
You are leader Carla. I put that in emails to people. I'll say, hey, leader Carla, leader Kimi, leader Shivali, leader Huma, because you're leaders. Thank you for being leaders.
Thank you for recognizing that, Pastor Billy. Having said that, I think this has been a marvelous conversation, and I am thrilled about that. And Huma, I love the idea of continuing on communication, because it is so very, very important. So do me a favor, remind me in a message so I stay on it. And we will be back on Tuesday with another MindPlore. I can't tell you who will be there because I don't know yet. I know I'll be there. That's the only person I'm sure of. But I will see everyone soon. I hope everyone has learned something from this conversation. And can we wave goodbye? Bye, everyone. And we are